Welcome to the show, Gearheads. We just watched a rainy, wet Turkish Grand Prix in Formula One, and Lewis Hamilton wins the race and wins his seventh world championship. And it was a fantastic day for him to do that and really showed his skill in this race. This is John Massengale sitting in the studio in Austin, and I'm joined over Zoom by Jonathan Green, Les Kaiser, and Dave O'Neill. And Jonathan, I want to start with you. What do you think about Lewis Hamilton's drive today?
Hey, I think Jonathan stepped away, but wow, what a drive. I don't think anybody could, I don't think that's really a surprise for anybody. Possibly the surprise of going 30 some odd laps on intermediates or even rain tires was a surprise that Lewis could even pull that off. That was a great race. The weather was all over the place as we saw.
Yeah, and it was really a shame for Lance Stroll, and he led a good bit of the race. Of course, started on pole and sounded nice and calm for most of the race, and then it just went all downhill for him. Jonathan, I see you're back at the mic. What do you think about this race today?
Incredible, really. You've got to kind of put everything aside and talk about Lewis. That's where I just drifted off to listen to his interview. Very emotional, as you can imagine, and fitting of a seventh world title. If you're going to match Michael Schumacher, you do it in style, and he did. And I think that it shows the mark of the man. And yes, you've got to be in the best car to win. It's always the case. But that's Formula One, and that is what the game of Formula One is. And as we said years ago, everybody said, if you remember, when he joined Mercedes, what on earth is he doing joining a team that is useless? Mm-hmm. And here we are. So,
well, Dave, what do you think about Lewis's drive strategically? And because at one point you're thinking, well, we haven't heard anything from Mercedes all weekend, not in qualifying and not in the first part of the race. Bottas having a miserable race, but just Lewis Hamilton just hanging in back there. What do you think of his drive?
Well, I think the more you unpick it, the more you can understand what a fantastic drive it was. They didn't quite understand the intermediates yesterday. We talked about that earlier on, and certainly Bottas didn't understand them today. That was quite clear. But the guy who did, and that's why he's 7 times world champion, is Lewis. He understood them. He kept the heat there, and then when they went through their graining phase, he managed to light them up again. And that's the sort of thing he's filled with in his index. He can go and get these tires to work when other people are struggling. And today in particular, with the changing conditions, that's exactly what he did. Showed everyone what he was. Max even struggled. We all talked about him earlier as well, that he was going to be good in the wet, and he couldn't manage to make that work. So I think the more and more we look at it and the more and more we unpick it, the problem is when you see Lewis on the top step all the time, you think it's boring. But these are the races where you can start to understand how far apart he is from everyone else on the grid.
Dave, you're exactly right. One of the things that I thought of as I watched this was seeing Lewis back in the pack. I think of Tiger Woods years ago on the back nine, and he's behind, and here comes the Jaws music. When's he? Watch him. He's going to start picking them off. He's going to strike, and he's going to pick. And that is what sets him apart, is the ability to pull that out in the worst kind of conditions, and he still pulls through.
Hey, Dave, what about the tires, the intermediates, as they turn to slicks? I was curious if that strategy was actually going to work, if those tires were going to hold up like slicks.
Yeah, that was interesting. I was, and at that point, that's where you have to be so precise, is keeping it on the dry part of the track. And then it was quite funny when Lewis got asked to come in,
Yeah.
I think 2 laps from the end, and it was, no, I'm staying out.
Yeah.
Well, he just said in the interview that he reminded how he, how he won a championship in 2007 that way, or lost a championship that way. Because he was in the pit lane. So he said, I remember that, and he said I wasn't going to risk it, and I felt good on the tires. So, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, Dave, do you think that no matter what, Hamilton was not gonna follow team orders and gonna stay out?
Well, I think the interesting bit there is he's got so much experience at the sharp end that he's probably ahead of the others, when it comes to positive thinking, and he kind of, I don't know, I think he's kind of overtaking a lot of the engineers when it comes to those particular scenarios when you have the changing conditions. It's all right when everything's dry and the wind's at 10 mile an hour and the track's at 55.5 degrees or whatever. But I think those conditions, no computer can forecast what's going to happen.
Well, sorry.
No, sorry.
No, but that's where you start to see that rarefied air of a Schumacher and of a Senna. There are very few drivers that can actually take control of 40 people, literally, during a race and almost outthink them because he's in the best position to do so, i.e. he's driving the car. They're advising him. They're saying, hey, it's going to rain, come in. That's the best advice they can give, but he overrules it and that just shows the sheer confidence of a man in the zone. Anybody like you mentioned, Tiger or Tom Brady. Tom Brady makes his own calls.
They've been doing it that long. They're like a coach on the behind the wheel. But
correct.
Hey guys, let's go ahead and take our quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have our guest join us, Eric Boulier. Very excited to have Eric on the show, and we'll have him right after the break. You're listening to Speed City. We'll be back after these messages.
Hi guys, Romain Grosjean from Haas F1 team, and this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show. We just watched the Formula One Turkish Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton wins the race and wins his 7th world title, tying Michael Schumacher. And we are very excited to welcome our guests to the show. We want to welcome Eric Boulier, who is the former team principal for Lotus F1 and racing director for McLaren F1 and the managing director at the French Grand Prix. Eric, welcome to Speed City. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to join you guys.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us, and we enjoyed watching an unusual race in an unusual year, but another different race with lots of action on the track. And you know, we were just talking about Lewis Hamilton and how he was making the call there to stay out at the end. I want to get your take on this, because we're talking about how Lewis is essentially, he's so experienced that you've got like a coach behind the wheel, and with his ability to make a judgment call like that, and the team, letting him make a call like that. But what do you think about that aspect of Lewis Hamilton?
Well, that's obviously why he's been 7-time world champion. His ability of understanding his race craft. That's a talent, one of the talent he has, and one of the talents a multiple world champion have. And in tricky condition, to be honest, you always leave a room or space to the driver for a last call in terms of strategy. And I guess in that case, he felt he was good, his tires were good, and he was on a good pace, and he didn't need to stop. So that was really, really impressive, and obviously he's a great champion.
Mm. Yeah, well, we were saying essentially the same thing, and watching history. And Dave O'Neill, you were just saying something about Lewis, about from this point forward, we get to watch what he does and how the team reacts to him.
Yeah, I think it's really going to be interesting moving forward. They're going to have a strong car next year, and they're building up for the next set of rules as well. And I think that he's on a different level, and I think it's going to be very difficult for anyone to come close to him in the season next year. And then also what he's done. I know he's undone Michael, but there's an awful lot of good in the right place at the right time to be able to put a team together, and also a driver pairing together that can string those amount of wins and constructors together. So I look forward to watching him next year, seeing him relax a little bit, I guess, and then go out and enjoy himself for the next couple of years.
Can I ask Eric a question? As being somebody who's been in that position, one of the stories that came out this week was how much credit Toto Wolff should get, having been advised by Alain Prost, not to create that super team and create an environment which works for everyone. How much do you look at that as being also a factor in allowing Lewis to get so far ahead? Because Michael had that with Eddie Irvine and with Massa and so on. And it's an interesting dynamic as a team manager. You've been there. Do you see Toto Wolff as being a huge part of this success for Lewis?
Yes, definitely, and not only Toto, obviously the whole team, the technical management team as well has been key in that success. In terms of management, you have to keep the balance between your drivers, and you can see having Lewis and Bottas together is a good balance. There is nobody. Obviously, Lewis is dominating it, but Valtteri is also fast enough to, if I may, kick Lewis has, okay, which is a good emulation for the team. Where Toto has been brilliant is to not only manage, the ego of the drivers and the balance between them, not letting the competition or the competitiveness of each other taking over, the ambience, but also in protecting the technical team management. Make sure the guys at the office and the guys at the tracks, they also stay motivated, which is obviously the key point. Still eager for more winning. And obviously, Mercedes didn't put a foot wrong one year over another one. They each year they developed their car, but they always made progress. They never went backwards. So I guess the credit to all this organization and the success of Mercedes and Lewis is obviously, yes, due to Toto management or Toto ability to manage. Yeah.
Eric, I've got a question for you. I know you've got an engineering background yourself. One of the things that I always felt myself, my perception is that Lewis is weak on engineering speak, but he seems to pull it off. What do you think he's doing when he doesn't seem so technical to communicate with him?
Well, I think you have the perception we have from the outside by listening to the car radio and radio transmission of Lewis. I think no drivers at this level is not also technically understanding what's going on in the car, and especially when there is some very clever system built around suspensions and others. So I think he's also very clever to not give too many information on the radio. So that's why he's maybe using a simplistic way of communicating with the team. But back in the office, I'm sure he's quite involved in understanding what the car is doing. He has to be technical, to manage his tires, manage his pace, and be able to take such a decision like today.
Interesting. It's more strategy.
Yes, well, I can tell you that communication sometimes is done on purpose to induce wrong something somewhere.
The game of chess.
Exactly.
Well, Eric, I want to ask you about this. He talked about when you first came on about an unusual season, unusual year for everyone, of course. But this has been, in a way, it's been exciting because of races like this that we've added to the calendar. What do you think about the way that Liberty and Formula One have handled this year and added all these races?
Well, they've done a tremendous job, to be honest, because it was not easy at the beginning of the season, and I know what I'm talking about because I was also involved in the discussion with them about the French Grand Prix. But they did a tremendous job to build up 17 races, build up this sanitary protocol with bubbles, which has allowed every team and drivers to compete and have a proper season at the end. Having also taken the opportunity to go, and take up some new track or old track, let's say, was also very a good move, a bold move from Liberty. So I think they've done a tremendous job to build a 2020 decent and proper season.
Well, it has been, I think it's been exciting to see all these new tracks and to add all of this excitement to it because we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know, first of all, we didn't know we were going to get a season, much less what if we were going to get a full season, how many races, and we get all of these great circuits added to it. But, well, guys, let's go ahead and take another quick break. We'll get back on our break schedule, and we'll be back after these messages.
Hi guys, this is Pierre Gasly and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show. We just got through watching the Turkish Grand Prix. Another exciting race for 2020. Been a good year for some good racing this year. And our special guest is Eric Boulier, and former racing director for McLaren. But Eric, why don't you talk about what you're doing now with the French Grand Prix?
Well, I'm heading the company who is organizing and promoting the French Grand Prix. So every Grand Prix, sometimes it can be the circuit itself, like Barcelona or like in Austin, actually. In the case of France, the promotion company is a separate entity from the track Paul Ricard. So that's this company I'm heading. We just organize and manage the Grand Prix.
Okay, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It doesn't have to be the same company as the circuit, but well, I know that Dave O'Neill wanted to ask you a question about the 2021 season because we had talked about that in our pre-show. But yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was kind of interested to see where the next couple of years were going calendar-wise, and if they were going to introduce any new races. And how you think the circus can sustain the system. I guess it's going to be a little bit easier with the rule changes and the budget caps. But just wanted to understand a little bit from your side where we are in F1.
Well, it's obviously not a secret that Liberty is looking at expanding the calendar, and my understanding is stretching the calendar with more races. As you know, Dave, there is a limit which is going to be the traveling of the people, obviously. And I guess next year they have announced 23 races. They're targeting maybe 24 or 25, I think, in the future. I don't know after the COVID, obviously, if there will be still the same appetite for F1 races. But it's true there is a few cities and countries in the world who would like to get an F1 race to get the visibility of the F1 circus. So they may succeed to go up to 24 or 25 in the next years. It's obviously part of their business. The revenue of F1, our first TV revenue, then, or media revenue, sorry, I should say, then promoters revenue, because we all pay a fee to get the rights to host the race, and then sponsors. I think, like you said, having the cost cap for the teams will help them a lot to behave more like a business, rather than a sports franchise where you just throw money in. But I think F1 will also have to look at how to secure on a more long-term basis, some historic races, I guess, because you can't go anywhere in the world. F1 needs to have some historical races and bays, which are the reference for the championship and for the fans.
Well, I was going to say, Eric, I mean, you are in that respect in a good place because of where France and where the French Grand Prix sits amongst all that historically. But I've been saying in previous shows, with Portimao and Imola, and now Turkey back, and a successful Grand Prix, it must make you kind of a little bit apprehensive that the competition is growing exponentially when this COVID season, which has been exceptional in that people like Mugello and people like Portimao have stepped up, but that just adds to the group of people who all want a Grand Prix and are capable of running one. Does that concern you as somebody running the French Grand Prix?
No, because first we have contract in place. Okay, that's first
number one.
the things to go through. Second is this. I know how this deal has been made. Okay, so if I take the case of the French Grand Prix, early April, Formula One wanted to have a European season over the summer and then move away to faraway races. And that's why, for example, the French Grand Prix had to be cancelled, because they are in charge of the calendar, and they were giving me a couple of dates which was not possible for us to host the race. One of the dates was in the middle of summer, when it's supposed to be very crowdy back on the French Riviera, and the other one was the track was not available at that time, because, like we said before, I'm not managing the track, so I have to rent the track, and the track was not available at that date. So that's why we ended up in a situation where we had to cancel the Grand Prix. Then there has been more cancellations, obviously, because of COVID and sanitary restriction. And that's where they have been contacted, or they contacted track like Portimao or Mugello or Istanbul, but this is one-off deals, and that was mainly to have a season to be broadcasted to the fan. But there is no today. There is no deal behind with tracks like Portimao or Mugello or Istanbul for the future. Nevertheless, I guess having successful races at this track might obviously wake the feeling of people up to have a race, or to build the financing behind to buy the rights in the future. But I think there is obviously a limit to the number of races, like we said. If F1 wants to be a global sport, they also need to be on the 5 continents. Today they are racing only on 4, so that's also something they need to consider. And I guess that's why there will be a minimum number of races per continent, which should protect the interest of people who has put all the effort, like the French Grand Prix, to be able to pay the race fee and host the race in a successful condition too.
Well, Eric, in relating to this topic, is that the French Grand Prix, I didn't even think about that not happening, because it's so historic, and really the history of motor racing in France and the culture around it is so big. That's really, is it weigh on your mind? It's such a big responsibility that you have running this organization because of all that history and all that responsibility.
Well, it's true that obviously France has always been part of the F1 circus. Today I think the number of French drivers on the grid is the highest from compared with every other nations. You have an engine manufacturer with Renault. We have a factory team with Renault, and a lot of suppliers as well. French suppliers are part of this. So I think there is, and the FIA as well. As you know, the governing body is obviously also based in Paris. So yes, there is a strong heritage, and having a French Grand Prix is obviously also part of the ecosystem in France. We made obviously we had some time with COVID, so we made some other research. But bikes and racing are the second sports industry in France after football. So that's quite have a big impact, in terms of employment, obviously, and obviously economical part. So yes, this is important, and I think the French Grand Prix definitely is a slot, as a historical race in the F1 calendar.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Eric, as we watch history with Lewis checking off another championship, I think of other drivers and champions we've seen. You specifically have worked with Fernando Alonso, who many call one of the greatest drivers in the world, one of my favorite guys around the paddock. But are we overvaluing Fernando in that he hasn't progressed very far beyond his first couple of championships?
No, I think he's still one of the greatest. Okay, he belongs to Michael Schumacher, Lewis world. He definitely should have won more championships. But as we have started this show today, one of the reasons why Michael Schumacher has been winning so many championships was he built up a strong environment with the right people around him at Ferrari, having been obviously able to create some stability as well. If you look at Lewis had McLaren, then moved to Mercedes. He's now there since a few years, in the right environment with the right support, and this is how he can every year keep his motivation up and win new championships. I think Fernando had a different case. I think he might have not chose the right teams at the right time, and has definitely not benefited from having a strong management, a strong technical team, and being in the right, if you want, upward spiral. And that's mainly why I think he only have 2 championships under his belt, but he could have definitely have more.
Eric, in that respect, as somebody who knows both what Fernando's all about and obviously cares what happens to Renault, what do you think now going forward? I mean, typical journalist like me would put 2 and 2 together and go, well, he's won all his championships with Renault, so he's going to go back there and do the same. In terms of the makeup now at Renault, with him going back, how do you see the sort of next few years for both he and the team? Can they come back to glory?
I think they will. I think, to be honest, there is no magic. He will not turn up there and they will be world champion. You have to work on, and you have to build on. If I was Renault, and if I could motivate Fernando to stay more than 2 years, that would be the best, to motivate everybody, having a long-term project. Then you get also the best engineer because they trust in your strategy of being there for a long time and be a winning team in the future. If you look at Ferrari, whose Michael has been many, many years, same for Lewis, people, they know they have the abilities, the means, the resources, and the time to build, and having all these people working together. Yeah, so yes, having Fernando in Renault next year and the year after will definitely help the team to go up or to be better. To be world champion, they will need more resources and a little bit of time.
Fantastic. I'm still behind him.
All right, guys, we need to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Eric Boulier. And if you want to join the conversation, give us a call, 512-643-LIVE, 512-643-5483. We'll be back after these messages.
I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show. We are just finishing up with our breakdown of the Formula One Turkish Grand Prix, and our special guest is Eric Boulier. And Eric, I want to ask you about the Renault team being from France, and they had a pretty good day today, finishing 10th and 11th, but they slipped in the Constructors' Championship. We're getting down to the end here, to the battle, and they are now 136 points behind McLaren at 149 and Racing Point at 154. But it seems like Renault's, they've had the nice resurgence in the last couple of years, but they got to get over that hump. Are you optimistic for the Renault team?
Yes, I am, because obviously it's hard work, and obviously tricky conditions, was this weekend obviously difficult for everybody, and you have to take some decisions sometimes which might not be the right one, or strategically that's a good one, but they're definitely going upwards. They have you could see, this is very close in terms of championship points between McLaren and the Racing Point. Sorry. So yes, definitely, it may change at every race, and obviously next race if they have good results, they can already get back to third.
Well, Dave O'Neill, I know you had a question for Eric, or a discussion point for Eric Boulier.
Yes, I've got two actually. First would be if you were running Renault, who would you partner Alonso with to get the best out of the team? And then secondly, Eric's pretty in touch with all the young drivers, made some good choices over the years, or very good choices, in fact. And what I'd like to know is a name for us to keep an eye on for the future that you think is going to do the business.
I thought you were applying for the job.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, partnering Fernando, I think with what Renault has today is a good setup. They have a young driver in Esteban Ocon, who is obviously very fine. Hello?
We got you back, Eric.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
And I think with Esteban Ocon, they have a good second driver. What you need is a driver who, like I said before, is capable of bringing home big points, challenging the lead driver, if I may call it like this, to make sure there is this emulation in the team, and always pushing both drivers or each other at each other to make sure they deliver and they drive the car to the limit. And that's how the team will go up and will be better and better. It will be also a challenge for the engineers then, because then they know that their driver pairs are doing their best. And if the car is not delivering, that means the car has not the capability of doing better. So having a second driver who is fast, and but also, who know that Fernando is there, and they need to be clear about, I wouldn't say team orders, but to make sure, they deliver the best for the team. Young drivers, there is a few ones, to be honest. One just recently actually won the Formula Renault, which is Victor Martins, a very talented guy. And another guy with Caio Collet, a Brazilian guy as well. So, there's still a long path to go to F1, but it looks like these two guys have the talent, yeah.
Yeah, Caio Collet, I met at Toyota. He's definitely, and I'm really impressed also with the Renault Junior program. They've got some really good up and coming stars,
yes.
And I think we're gonna see more from those kids. We're all hoping an American will make it, obviously, because that would be what we need, given that we've got an American team and an American track now. What's your thoughts on Gunter's decision making? We've been kind of discussing, the merits of taking two newbies and getting rid of both their experienced drivers. What's your take on where Haas are?
Well, it's always a challenge, obviously, to do that. I think the team maybe might needed some fresh air, if I may say this, or fresh motivation.
Mm-hmm.
It's also part of, I guess, strategy for the team. They change the commercial business strategy for the team. So I guess having younger drivers and gives them the opportunity to bring new sponsors. So I think it's all part of the strategy. So there is not a good or a bad. I think it's part of the decision from Gene to change the strategy of the team, and then the consequences, obviously, they had to renew the drivers.
Yeah.
Eric, I have a question for you as someone who's, running an organization like that. What do you think about the way that Circuit of the Americas has handled what they do here in Austin? They've, after a few years, they went to going to these really big names. We've had, Taylor Swift and Justin Timberlake and, these huge names that draw enormous crowds. What do you think about that and the way that, and overall, the way Circuit of the Americas has handled it?
Well, it's obviously it was a good strategy, a very good call from the promoter actually, because every Grand Prix, has a different public, because you have to consider what people are used to live or used to have or used to enjoy. I think it is like you said, America or US definitely has not been close to F1 for many, many years and decades. So now you have a Grand Prix, now you have a team. Yes, definitely you need to have drivers that would boost or boom the interest for F1 in the US. But in the case of the Grand Prix in Austin, having a superstar, coming and having a concert there has definitely brings a visibility, notoriety on the F1 race in Austin, and that was a big success. On the inverse, for example, we made some survey in France, and French people are not very much interested in having a concert because it's a different culture. This is, like you say, it's part of history. They are very interested to have more historical and, let's say, racing-related action on track, So it's different model. But what they have done with Austin and in that case was a good success.
All right. So what about another American-related question? We asked you about Haas F1, but do you, thinking about the rumor is, of course, that Mazepin and Schumacher coming in for Haas, but do you think that we could get a surprise there? Do you think that there could be another driver? I mean, there's no decision, obviously, 100% made yet, at least externally, that we know of. Do you think we could get a surprise? And do you think there's any shot at getting some sort of American behind the wheel of a Haas F1 car?
Well, I know some things. I don't know everything, so I think the best is to ask, obviously, Gunther or Gene. What about their plan in the future?
Good answer.
But it's none of my business today. So.
Well, yeah, that's probably true. We'll have to get Gunther back on, but Eric, I've
got a quick one for Eric before you sign off.
Go ahead.
Why hasn't anyone picked up Perez?
Yeah.
Ooh, good idea.
He's got to be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he has a strong sponsor network behind him, and he's a good driver, like he showed today again. I think there is some discussions in the background, to be honest.
Yeah,
and also, despite all his sponsors, he might not find a home in F1 next year, just because there is not the right opportunity for him or for the teams looking at drivers today. Williams has a different obviously strategy, and I don't know what they will do with their lineup next year yet, but yes, there's maybe not so many opportunities on the market left for him. So that would be a shame, but this is possible.
Man, I hadn't really thought about that because he's just such a valuable driver as he proved today. And I'm thinking when you say that, it's really would be weird just to not have him. But, well, Eric Boulier, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're almost out of time, but thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
And
Eric.
yeah, and
Thank you, guys.
Best of luck with the French
Thank you very
Grand Prix.
much to have invited me.
Yes, sir. Have a good.
Good luck with your
Thank you.
endeavors.
Thank you.
Cheers, Eric.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow.
All right, guys. We got about a minute left. Any last thoughts about today's race? I mean,
Yeah, Eric's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think again, a fresh circuit, fresh surface, crazy weather. A really great race. Like I said, I kept thinking of the theme from Jaws, watching Hamilton come up after his, securing the championship, getting that to happen.
Yep.
Love the drama that was there.
Yeah, and I again take my hat off to Liberty. In the middle of a global pandemic, we're pulling out a season that is memorable, and that's a hell of a thing. NASCAR have done it, Indy have done it, and I think Formula One are doing it.
Yep. Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. And of course, check us out on our website, speedcitybroadcast.com. But we'll be back every Sunday before the F1 races, and also our local show every Sunday night in Austin. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.
Happy drive.